Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to another special bonus episode of the Tom Petty Project. I'm one of your hosts, Kevin Brown, and I'm joined by my co-host, John Paulsen. This is the podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. We're going back in time and looking at the two albums that we didn't cover yet. So we wanted to touch on the second album, You're Gonna Get It. The second album in the Heartbreakers catalogue contains another couple of ever-present Tom Petty classics, and I'm looking forward to hearing John's thoughts on this one. So rather than me prattling on endlessly, let's dig into it. So it feels like we just talked about the last album.
Yeah, wasn't long ago.
It wasn't that long ago. Let's do some vital statistics. This one was released May 2nd, 1978. Again, the label was Shelter Records, distributed by ABC, and again, the producer was Denny Cordell, with additional production on this one, though, from Noah Shark and Tom Petty. So this was the first time Tom was credited as a producer, and that was, of course, the thin end of the wedge because he had his hands very firmly into every album after that. And also Noah Shark, who actually decided on the name of the album and the artwork. The band wanted to call the album Terminal Romance, which I'm not sure is much better as an album name. And of course, the original artwork was supposed to be a photograph by Anne Leibovitz, which I think would have been interesting. I don't think I've ever seen. The running time for this one, again, is even shorter than the first at 29 minutes and 38 seconds. And so I think the longest song is 3:24 on the album. And the singles from this one were I Need to Know, which was number 41 on the Billboard charts, number 46 in Canada, and Listen to Her Heart, which was number 59 on the Billboard. It's crazy how good some of the songs on the first two albums are without the albums themselves being as good as the rest of the catalogue. So I think let's just dig straight into some of these songs. And one of the first ones we sort of identified was Hurt. Give me your thoughts on Hurt.
Yeah, I like Hurt. This is one that popped up as I listened to this, 5 times or 6 times over the last couple weeks. I think the piano is really cool at the start. Tom's vocal has some flair. This definitely surprised me a little bit. And looking at the history of the track, I think he said that he wanted it to sound like a Dolly Parton song.
Yeah,
which was really fascinating to me, that Dolly Parton was not only just on his radar. I'm sure everybody knew who she was, but to try to emulate what she was doing, or sort of use her music as an inspiration for his. I think that's really cool. I'd love to hear her do a cover of Hurt. This one definitely jumped up, and it maybe might make the top 3 here. I'm trying to figure out what my third song is going to be, but I really like this track.
And it's got that again. It's sort of you've got, like I said, you've got that long sort of atmospheric intro to the song where you're not quite sure initially where it's going to go, and then it sort of breaks into a pretty typical, I'd say, early Heartbreakers song, but then it goes up a notch in the bridge. And so I'd written in the episode when I covered this, it's got a sort of a Beverly Hills Cop, Harold Faltermeyer feel to the bridge, and I stand by that comparison. It's a good thing because it gives it that sort of movie soundtrack dynamic to it that sort of, I think, elevates a song that could have been a little bit more ordinary, but with that intro and that bridge, it really kind of gives it more punch to me.
Yeah, I think you look at it, it's a little bit different than the 2 big songs on this album. So it's something a little different. It shows his ability to be versatile in his songwriting, which is, one of the things that stands out in these first few albums, is that he jumps around a little bit from genre to genre and is able to pull from different areas.
Yeah, definitely. And so then into, again, something that sounds completely different to that, Too Much Ain't Enough, which I'd said was, it's like a wicked, sleazy slide and blues shuffle. Again, they had that real shuffle in a lot of these early songs. And if I had to pick one Heartbreaker song for ZZ Top to cover, it might be Too Much Ain't Enough. I think that would be kind of cool to listen to, Billy and Dusty thrash that one out in the middle section. So
yeah, this is a good track. It's a good upbeat rock track. I think it's sort of, I wouldn't say it pales in comparison to I Need to Know or Listen to Her Heart. And I think part of this is that I've heard those songs so many times on the radio and they're just ingrained in my soul. Whereas Too Much Ain't Enough is something that comes on. I'm like, oh yeah, this is a pretty good track from that, that time in his career, that era in his career, first few albums, still trying to find himself. But this is a good one that I don't skip. And I think it's got a catchy enough chorus that it's fun to listen to every once in a while.
Yeah, and it's got a killer guitar sound on this one. Again, that's, I think, one of the things I love most about Mike Campbell. He's not Satriani sort of level virtuosity, but the one thing that he was always superb at and consistently throughout his career is picking exactly the right guitar tone for the song. And this one again, it's like a searing lightning bolt kind of lead, right? Like it just really rips into you, and then it's backed up by that. The drums are mixed so flat, but they're relentless, and it's got again that sort of that shuffle snare hit. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's one that maybe could have been released as a single and wasn't. There was only 2 singles released off this album, which is interesting when you think about it. You think usually at least 3. And this might have been one that could have gotten some radio airplay.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Now, speaking of the singles, though, again, you've got 2 songs off this album that are just different level to pretty much anything else that was going on at the time. So I Need to Know, of course, it's, again, it opens with that electric, just sort of relentless driving riff.
Yeah, this is it just kind of goes back to our previous conversation where why are we putting this at track 6? Listen to Her Heart, track 7. Listening to this album several times in a row, there's some good stuff on that first side, and then all of a sudden I Need to Know hits you, and then Listen to Her Heart follows it up, and you're just like left kind of scratching your heads like, this is such amazing music, why are we burying it on the second half of this album? I Need to Know is just a banger. Whenever he played it in concert, the fans loved it. It up tempo. He didn't always play it. This was probably I think between I Need to Know and Listen to Her Heart, I don't know that they would always play both. They usually would play one or the other, and it was usually Listen to Her Heart. I think that was the more popular one with the fans. But I Need to Know definitely saw it live several times. I think Stevie Nicks did a pretty good cover of it as well on a show with him, or maybe on her own. But it's a great track. It's just a banger.
Yeah, I think Stevie Nicks, wasn't that on the like that PBS special? Wasn't it on that one where she comes on, she does Inside Her,
I think so, yeah.
Dragging Your Water, and then I think it was Need to Know. Yeah, I think that's the one. And I think Tom even says this is the way the song should be sung, which is possibly generous, but
well, it's always like his relationship with Stevie is hilarious. Just in that Stevie really wanted to just join the Heartbreakers, and he kept telling her there's no girls in the Heartbreakers, but she was like this big sister, little sister, I think, little sister, that just wanted to be a part of the band and was always hanging around, and eventually got herself, spots on the 30th anniversary tour, I think, and playing a lot of shows with her when she was around. So it's just a funny, cool relationship between those 2.
Yeah, we'll definitely get more into that too when we get on Hard Promises with Insider and some of I think a couple of other songs that she sang backing on. But I remember listening to an interview, or maybe it was in one of the books, where he talks about her, and she said, like, can you just, for Belladonna, can you write more songs? He says, no, like you can write songs. You're a good songwriter. You don't need me to do that. So I think just having that confidence and that presence, because Stevie Nicks by that time was pretty established in Fleetwood Mac. It's not like she was an unknown art, an unknown quantity. So for him to say, well, no, you can go write your own songs, I think.
And I think that she wasn't necessarily afraid to do that. I think she was just wanted to be a part of Tom Petty and wanted Petty to be a part of her album, because she just could sense that he was, a fantastic songwriter, and he would make it better. But maybe she didn't want to do all the work either. I don't know. But I think anytime you can try to get Petty to write some songs for you, you probably have to try. If you have that sort of relationship where you can ask him, it doesn't hurt to ask, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so the second big track off the album, Listen to Her Heart. Again, like you said, buried on the second side. And again, it's so different to I Need to Know. Like it's a completely different song. Again, showcases that softer side, and obviously it's Tom trying to do his sort of Birds impression, and obviously loved Roger McGuinn and thought the world of him. And it's also sort of challenging the establishment with that lead line, right? So, the record company wanted that line changed, but Tom stuck to his guns, and of course the song's all the better for it.
Yeah, and thinking back to the mid 70s, it's amazing that the word cocaine is offensive and can't have it in a single, or were they worried about it, the radio not playing it because the word cocaine is in it, because it's pro drug? Well, the whole lyric is that it's negative. It's that she's not going to fall for you and your cocaine. It's a negative connotation. So it's so weird to me thinking about some of these conversations and decisions that were made back in the day. And I'm glad he stuck to his guns, because it's just so much more effective as cocaine as opposed to champagne, which wouldn't have made a whole lot of as much sense, I guess, because I think, back then there was one that, cocaine was picking up and, addictive, and it's just kind of a nasty thing. So a lot worse for you than champagne. So the track is amazing. It probably didn't do as well because of that lyric.
Right.
Probably would have been. It was already one of his biggest hits, certainly at that time. But looking at his discography as a whole, it's up there. I mean, your "Listen to Her Heart" is probably top 10 song, I think, in terms of structure and catchiness and all that. So, fantastic, just a fantastic track. And again, it's like moments of absolute sheer brilliance amidst some good songs and some kind of songs, and again putting it seventh. Like, I would love to see all the best songs that were seventh
Yeah.
in a track list, in a list, and see where, like, of all the classic rock artists out there, and just see where "Listen to Her Heart" would rate, because I would have to figure it's up there.
Oh, now you've said that, I'm gonna have to go do that, because that's just gonna be an
That's
itch
gonna
that
be
I'm
a
gonna
lot
have to
of work. That's
scratch. I'd have to pick maybe the top 50 rock and roll albums and see what. Just look at those tracks.
Yeah, look at number 7.
Because I think, like you said, I think it's going to be up there. And again, talking about that lyric, there were sort of two things that I thought when you think about it. And Tom said, cocaine's more expensive than champagne. Like, most people can afford champagne. That's the point. Is this guy's a bit flash and he's trying to seduce her away with this thing. But then the other thing, if you think about just sonically, champagne is a very soft word, right? And cocaine, it's got punch to it. And it's that very hard 2 syllables, got 2 hard C's, right? So I just think sonically it works so much better. And if you change that, it completely wrecks the vibe of that opening line. It doesn't work. So the other song that we'd sort of decided to talk about is "No Second Thoughts." And for me, this is the sleeper on the album. The percussion, the feel of it, it's again completely different, and it sort of presages a ton of that sort of diversity that Tom would diverse songwriting techniques and sounds that Tom would use on later albums. And I also love how they did this one live. It was more of a little bit more of a country groove to it when they played it live, and I think that arrangement really, really works for this song.
Yeah, I appreciate you sending along the YouTube link to the live version of that off of the live anthology, and I don't think I've heard it before. It was on the not the deluxe edition, but it might have been the deluxe edition, where it was the 5th disc.
Yeah,
it wasn't included in the 4-disc version, which is the one I have. So I'm gonna have to get that. I want to hear the rest. I didn't realize that was out and a thing. So listening to this live, I think takes it to 3 or 4 notches higher to me. I don't think that the production on the album did it justice at all. Yeah. Listening to it and then going back and listening to the live version and going back and listening to the studio version, the percussion to me sounds like it's like recorded in a cave. It's got like a weird echo to it I don't like. And then Tom's vocal on it, he's doing some weird things with it, which I don't like. There's a second thought where he says "no second thoughts," and it almost seems like he's running out of breath, which is not usual for him. And I didn't it just kind of turns me off. And so it's not that the song isn't good. It's a really well done song. Like, it's a very well constructed, it's catchy, but it's kind of a quieter acoustic kind of song. And I thought that live version, the percussion sounds a lot better for obvious reasons. And his vocals the performance is perfect on it. So I think that will become my de facto, like, quintessential version of this song that I'll actually listen to pretty frequently now, because this is one that popped up. I knew that I think it was, I want to say it was Kurt Vile that played this song on a Tom Petty radio when he was doing a guest DJ. I know it was an artist like that. I think it was Kurt Vile. But he brought up "No Second Thoughts" as one of, like, his little underrated gems. And I didn't, hearing the studio didn't catch me, but definitely live, you can hear how good the song could have been, in my opinion. Like, I just think that it just didn't do it justice in the studio.
And again, I always go back to that and think about those first 2 albums. The production partly I think it's the production is lacking, but again, I mean, they're a brand new band. They're playing live. They were super tight live band and brilliant at doing that right from the get-go. But doing it in a studio is a completely different kind of worms. Like, it's a different process. It's a different set of skills that you need. It's a different tolerance and patience that you need. And so I think the way that Iovine really whipped them into shape, and then Rick Rubin took that through, and Jeff Lynne, of course, and all the later albums with, Ryan O'Leary and all those albums, they're produced by really experienced producers. With this one, it almost like it was produced off the corner of Denny Cordell's desk. And I know that Tom even said that Denny really wasn't around for most of the production of this album. It was Noah Shark was doing most of the day to day, and Denny would come in so last minute and say, "Oh well, maybe change the bridging now, or I don't like this." So it wasn't hands on. So they didn't have that immediate feedback from an experienced producer who could have said, "Actually, the percussion sounds like it's been recorded in a cave. Maybe we need to re-record that." So
That might be harsh, but like late 70s into the 80s was a weird time for music in general, and I think that there was some technology coming into the studios that maybe wasn't ready for prime time yet, and
yeah,
and the artists, and this is not specifically directed at Petty, but I think there was a lot of artists in their late 70s, early 80s that put out some albums that sounded a little dated now because they were doing some things, or able to do some things that maybe they shouldn't have been doing, or should have just stuck with analog or whatever. And that specific track to me sounds a little, late 70s to me, and not in a great way. It's just the production of it, though. I think that the track itself is pretty excellent when you kind of pull away some of that stuff.
Yeah, I can go with that completely. Okay, so, and I mean, I think this album has the song that I would rate probably as the song I would rate lowest of everything that Tom put out, and that song's Restless. Because to me, and Tom even says in the book that it was a song that they threw together because they just needed to finish the album. It was sort of, and it has that feel of being an idea. Like it's got a good sort of idea behind it, but it just feels hurried and rushed and not complete to me, and I could take or leave that one.
I think you look back at what they were trying to do at this point. They were touring a lot. They basically wrote the second album so they would have more songs to play live, which I thought was an interesting reason to play, to record an album. But they're just trying to get out some of these hits. They're trying to get out "Listen to Her Heart," "I Need to Know," so that they can, "Too Much Ain't Enough" probably, and so they can go and play those live and have the fans know what they're playing, and be able to go buy it. I think is probably what was happening. So it basically doubles their number of songs they can play in any given set, and they don't have to play some of the songs they're sick of from that first album.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the thing about that though is that they did so many covers. Like throughout their career, they did lots of covers. So trying to fill out a live set with, some filler, it's like, I don't know, you need to do that.
Yeah, they probably didn't want to play 5 covers in a show though, so they're probably getting sick of some of those songs from that first album. Just interviewing a few bands from my old job, and like you could tell that they just get tired of playing the same tracks over and over and over again, and sometimes they have to, but certainly some of these kind of fringe tracks they probably got sick of playing.
Yeah, for sure. And then so we do have there is a B-side from this album that I don't know what to say to you, which again it's definitely a B-side. It's an interesting song. Like again, it's almost got like a Chet Atkinsy kind of super 50s rock and roll bounce to it, but I can see why it doesn't fit on the album. Like you definitely wouldn't sub that one in, right?
Yeah, it's a weird track. I went back and listened to it. I had heard it before, and I was like, "Oh yeah." Like I wouldn't mind hearing that if I'm cruising around listening to Tom Petty radio. Like it just comes on. Like, but that's not something I'm seeking out. Just a weird. It doesn't fit within the scope of this album. So that's one decision where like, okay, good job, guys. You left the right one off.
And I think there was. I was looking back and I couldn't find it. There is one song, and it was either on the first or second album. I think it's on the second, where they'd recorded it and they'd finished it and they were pretty happy with it. But then the tape got mangled, like it just they lost it. I can't find it, so I'm gonna have to go back and try and dig that out. But one of the other songs that I wanted to talk to you about from this era, and it was never recorded in the studio, is "Dog on the Run." So not "Dogs on the Run," obviously, which he did later on, but "Dog on the Run," which is that sort of 9-minute. And again, a kind of an interesting, strange song because it starts out as being a full-on Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers rocker, comes out the gate flying, but then it breaks down into this sort of 4-minute, 5-minute prog rock, Benmont space opera kind of weird thing. It's almost like a Louisiana Rain type of thing. And I think that if you cut that out and you pare it down, which I'll put a link to a little edit that I did of this, like I did a Denny Cordell pseudo edit, right? And I think if you pare it down to the sort of the bare bones of that, or maybe even throw sort of a bit of a solo into the middle, I think it's a great track. And I'm really surprised that once they played that in 76, 77, it just disappeared. They never played it again. And I'd love to know why that happened. Like, why did they drop that?
Yeah, I listened to your version of it a couple of times, and I can't say that I've heard the original version.
Okay.
But I think I just love that the nerdiness of what you just did there, which is to edit that track and to like try to repair it and present it as a track that should be on this album. I think that's great. I think that's fun. That's what this is all about. Us just kind of talking about Tom Petty and fandom and what would we do different and how could we ever, done this, or is this perfect, or is this could this like what are we even doing here in the middle of this track with a 4-minute version of whatever Benmont was doing. I need to locate that. I don't know. That's not on the streaming services. I don't think that live EP from
No.
77. So I need to try to find the original version, kind of compare your version to that one. I didn't have time prior to this, but
Yeah.
it does have a pretty good groove to it, and that's not one that I've listened to a bunch where it's really an earworm, and I can, I can even sing the chorus right now. So
Yeah.
not that you'd want me to, but it was cool to listen to your edit of it, and I could see it on this album. It did fit within the scope of this album, certainly more than that other B-side we were just talking about.
Yeah, no, totally. And then, like I said, even when I get to speak to any of the Heartbreakers, it's definitely a burning question: is what happened to that song? Because it's so strange for it being, like I said, it's the bones of that song are so strong that it just disappeared. And I think that, as I said, I think maybe because it's another sort of 9-minute jam the way it was done live, and you have breakdown in the set that already does that. Maybe it's just that. Maybe it's just a function of, well, we already have that. We've already got the song that does that, so let's just push this one aside because breakdown is stronger. So,
well, I hope you get to talk to Mike Campbell at some point. That'd be fun to ask him about some of these things. And I bet you that we have now talked about Dog on the Run, for 3 minutes now, and that's probably more than he's thought about that track in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like I don't think he probably will remember it if he hears it, but I don't think that's one where I don't think he's sitting there thinking, "Oh, Dog on the Run could have been a big hit for us."
Yeah, we never know though, right? Because maybe that was one of his licks that he.
That's true.
It could have been one of the ones that he thought, "Why are we not playing this one?" So.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we're talking about production and sort of are doing our little producer for a day, how would you? So I'll let you go first. And how would you sequence this album?
Yeah, I would start. I think starting with "I Need to Know" is. I don't think it's. I wouldn't do it. I would put that second, and I would put "Listen to Her Heart" first. I think "I Need to Know" is a little too brash. It's not quite as catchy to me as "American Girl." So I think I would go listen. I think the "Listen to the Heart's the best track on the album. Again, this is your second album. You haven't really hit it big. Put your best stuff up top. So I would go "Listen to Her Heart" and then "I Need to Know," because I think those two back to back in that order is a really, really strong way to start. And then I think, it gets a little bit tougher with this album. I don't have clear 3, 4, 5, but I probably would go with "Hurt." "Hurt" is it's a change from those two songs, and it's kind of shows your songwriting breadth and versatility. And I think it's kind of a cool song, probably the third best song on the album as it was recorded. And then, I don't know about 4, maybe "Magnolia." I think you put "Magnolia" 4. And I think "No Second Thoughts" is a good one for 5. And I would want that to be a different version of that in the studio.
Yeah.
And I think I won't go into the whole second side, but I think "Too Much Ain't Enough" would be a good one to start the second side with, and then maybe "You're Gonna Get It," and then kind of go out from there, with the last 3 tracks.
Cool. Yeah, man. I mean, and I think I started with "I Need to Know" because again, I like the idea of opening with just that kicker, just that again that it crashes into life, right? There's no build; it's just immediate. It's like we're playing this. It's loud. It's fast. It's rock and roll. Deal with it. And I just love that immediacy. So I would start with it, and then I put. This is where we differed. So this is one where I didn't put the 2 strongest tracks as 1 and 2 in my playlist. I'd go "You're Gonna Get It" second, because again, for the same reasons you're talking about her, it shows that breadth and it's a different feel, different vibe. I again also went with her "Magnolia," "No Second Thoughts" to close out side 1, and then open side 2 with "Listen to Her Heart." So again, now you've got 2 openers that really sort of engage. And similarly to you, I think the last 4 tracks on side 2 you could interchange, but I would drop off "Restless." I'd take that out and I'll put "Dog on the Run." If they did a studio edit to that song, so I'd go maybe "Too Much Ain't Enough," "Baby's a Rock and Roller," "Dog on the Run," and then close with "When the Time Comes," because I think that is a decent closer. I think that's not a bad closer.
So let me ask you: Are you putting this together with the situation the band was at the point that they were at? Because that's where I put myself. I'm like, okay, we have our first album. It was okay in terms of how commercial it was or how well it did.
Yeah.
And then so for me, it's like I think you have to get "Listen to Her Heart" on that first side, and I would lead with it. And then, I
Yep.
mean, I would put the 3 or 4 best songs up front again, and then try to craft the second half in a way that's sonically interesting and at least shows the versatility of the band. But I think at this point, especially in music, and for bands that were hungry, that you just need that first half of the album, 4 or 5 songs, to be really interesting and your best stuff back
Yep.
then. And especially for Petty and Heartbreakers at the point that they were at in their career. I mean, he could do whatever he wants when he's releasing his 10th album. He's
Yep.
got his whole fan base that's going to listen to the whole thing 1,000 times. But at this point, how hungry and how, how, not, I wouldn't say needy, but they were desperate, but like, you really want those first 2 albums to break you out, break you and send you into your third album, where the record company sees you as a value, or as an asset to support, and to give them the studio time and everything that they need in order to succeed on that third, fourth album into their rest of their thing. So I think you got to put "Listen to Your Heart" in the front. But I mean, I could see why you put it 6, because it does grab you for that second half of the album. But I think you got to put it up top.
Well, I will listen to both playlists, and you know what? I most likely will change my mind, because that's the beauty of Tom Petty's music, right? No matter what order you listen to, it's all great. So
if I was in the room, that would just be my pitch. I would go, "You have a monster hit with 'Listen to Her Heart,' and I think you need to know it too." So putting those back to back up top is just a way, just similar to American Girl and Breakdown, I think.
Yeah. No, you've convinced me. I think you're right. So you've convinced me, and I think it goes back to partially what we were talking about, right? This was an album that was at least partially written just so they had more songs to go out on the road with. So you do get that feeling overall that it's a bit hurried. It's not been quite thought out as much, maybe, as some of the songs. Like you said, the production on a couple of the songs aren't quite where they could have been. Restless is just not quite there. It's not been polished as much as Tom usually did. So you get that sense of, again, not sophomore slump, but it could probably been a little bit better presented as an album, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a saying that you have 18 years to write your first album, and then 18 months to write your second, and that might even be more compressed in some of these situations. The other thing that I think is interesting is the album title, because I don't really I have a tough time taking it seriously, because it's got an exclamation point in it, and "You're gonna get it," and I'm like, well, why are we picking that song as the title track? I mean, usually the title track is like something like one of the best songs or top songs on the album, or it says something that encapsulates the whole album.
Yeah.
But "You're gonna get it" with an exclamation point, I think was a misstep too. I would love to hear these conversations and just sit there and just be like, okay, that's how that happened. Okay.
No kidding, hey. Be great to talk to No Shark, right? To find out, well, what are you thinking, dude? Because I mean, even the album cover, it's so. Again, it's one of those things that it just doesn't. It hasn't aged. Like, it looks like a 70s rock album cover, right? It's just kind of cheesy and really super saturated blue. And it's like, man alive, this is a bit weak,
I mean, it almost looks like an early 80s. Like, they were ahead of their time, I think, with some of the fonts and the colors and stuff that they're using there. And I think I'm not 100% sure, but I think that this was the record where the engineers were dropping acid every day. I think there was a quote watching the running down a Dream documentary, where he was saying, well, it worked for them. We weren't doing it, but they would basically drop acid and come to the studio. And so, I mean, I could see how that's maybe playing into some of these decisions, because if you have somebody that's tripping, maybe you end up with that album cover, that album title, or just maybe just a list of songs in this order.
Yeah. That's a fair point. So it's what we're saying. It's a Tom Petty song on acid. That's what we'll call it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because at its best, it's as strong as the debut, but on average, I think it's definitely a little bit lower. Just the songs aren't quite, on average, as good overall, despite the two sort of best songs being as good as American Girl and Breakdown.
Yeah, and I think if you take out the two, and I would call them two country rock songs from the first album, and you kind of put them on a play, or you remove those two, and the other 8 you put on with these 10 songs, that this sounds like one group of songs, or like this was their era of this. And before you even get into Damn the Torpedo Sessions, like this was this era, and they didn't have a whole, like, there was not a lot of country-ish stuff on this album that I can remember. Magnolia maybe, but that was more of a birdsy type song.
Yeah, there's no country flavor on this one. No.
And then he did say he was trying to do a Dolly Parton with Hurt, but I didn't catch that. I wouldn't have said, oh, this sounds like a Dolly Parton song. That just is what he said. I have to trust him on his word there.
Well, it's funny too, though, because I think, those influences, because you hear artists talk about those things a lot, right? Who are my influences? And sometimes Dolly Parton, like you're Slipknot, you listen to Dolly Parton, like really? Is that how does that work? Like, how does that influence? But it's what you take from it, right? It's not like, it's not saying that he wanted to write something that sounded like Dolly Parton necessarily sonically. It's always going to sound like Tom Petty, but just drawing inspiration for maybe the structure of it or the lyrics.
Yeah,
of it,
structure.
Right? So,
yeah, or melody. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's do our top threes, and I'll go first for this one then. So again, I don't think we're going to be in too much disagreement with "Listen to Her Heart" and "I Need to Know." Definitely 1 and 2, and then for me it's no second thoughts, because, like you said, it was a song that I definitely missed the first couple goes around, and then when I went back to listen to it for the album for the review episode, it stuck in my head, and I was humming that and listening to it over and over and over. And again, once I heard that live version, it's like, oh man, this is a really top-notch, top-quality song. My first season guest, Dallas Elliker, and I, we're actually going to try and do a cover of it. We're going to see if we can do a remote cover of that one, and just do guitar and vocals, or guitar, piano and vocals, or maybe we'll do a sort of a more full arrangement. But I'm going to have fun playing with that and seeing what we can come up with as well. So that's my three: "Listen to Her Heart," "I Need to Know," and "No Second Thoughts."
Okay, I'm gonna go with "Listen to Her Heart," "I Need to Know," and I think that if we track my streams, listens from this point forward, it's gonna be those two, and then it'll probably be the live version of "No Second Thoughts" is my third most listened to. But I don't want to put this studio version on it. I'm gonna go with "Hurt" because I think that's the other standout track. I mean, I think "Too Much Ain't Enough" is an interesting track as well. I listen to that once in a while, but I'm gonna go with "Hurt" as the third one.
And I think that "Hurt" I gave an 8. I think I gave that an 8 as well. So yeah, great track. And I wouldn't disagree with that. And again, maybe I'll do an EP. We'll do a 4-song EP with all 4 of them, and maybe I'll even throw the live version as the version of "No Second Thoughts." So okay, any final thoughts on the second album?
I think we talked about it. I think we agree. The highs are still pretty high. They're up there with "American Girl" and "Breakdown." I would put those two ahead of "Listen to Her Heart" and "I Need to Know," as far as if you're taking like a 2v2, which is gonna win. So maybe a little bit of a step back from them in terms of their peak at this point in their career, but the album serves its purpose because there's enough here that they can add 4 or 5 songs to their set list, and that's what that's why they wrote the album and released it when they did. They wanted more songs to play live, so I think it serves a purpose, and it takes them into that third album, which is crucial. Jimmy Iovine talks about how important that third album is. You either put up or shut up, and I think these 2 albums serve their purpose in getting them to that point where they could attract a producer like that who could get Damn the Torpedoes out of them, because they did have the hits here. So that's sort of where I would put it. This is not one I would pull out and play a lot, I don't think. I think towards the bottom of his discography for me. But again, he's got the 2 rock solid greatest hit type songs on it as well. At 6 and 7, by the way. I don't know why. I still don't know why I put it at 6 and 7.
And again, it's a great point too, though, because I think that when you listen to this album, you definitely don't hear "Damn the Torpedoes" coming as the next one. You would never. So if you gave these in isolation to someone who's never heard of Tom Petty, you'd say, well, that was his second album, this was his third. You'd think, well, what the hell happened on his third? Because that's a different level. Everything about it, everything about that album, the production's better, the songwriting's amazing, start to finish. The artwork's brilliant. The album title's superb. Everything about that album is just so much better than this album that you kind of think, well, that's really weird that that's the same guy.
Well, I think you could, like, if you look back at it from our standpoint of having gotten into Petty later, you see that he did get American Girl and Breakdown on the first album. You did see I Need to Know and Here Comes My Girl, or Listen to Her Heart. Sorry, Listen to Her Heart on this album. It, like, Damn the Torpedoes is basically taking those 4 and putting it on Damn the Torpedoes along with a couple other good songs and a little bit of filler here and there, album tracks here and there. So you could see the potential,
right?
But you would not see Refugee necessarily coming to that level, and then everything else that came with it. That's a tough one to pick top 3 for, as we learned doing that podcast.
Right on, man. Right on. Okay, well, we'll wrap this one up, folks. So we've got our first two albums we've given you as bonus content. We will be recording an album wrap for Hard Promises, which I'm really looking forward to, and I think that's going to be very hard for me to pick three from, for sure. Again, if you're enjoying these conversations, come talk to me and John on social media. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at The Tom Petty Project, and on Twitter at Tom Petty Project. You can also find John on Twitter at 444_John. So that's number 4, FOR, number 4_John. Come talk to us. Come tell us what we got wrong. Come tell us what we got right. We would love to hear your thoughts. And we'll see you again fairly soon to talk about Hard Promises in a few weeks. So we'll leave it there and we'll say bye-bye.